dealing with the digital fraud and proving falsification of documents. So we have the capacity to do that, and that is under the digital forensics and question that document examination. And then the final bit is the geospatial information system. The use of geographical information in tax administration. How are we able to bring this information and then tie them out to see that we are able to see what is missing and who is actually, who do we see and who are we not seeing? And using this tool, we should be able to improve on identifying the taxpayer locations, be able to do segmentation of the tax base in given areas. So this GIS is a tool that will enable us to actually appreciate who are we reaching and who are we not reaching in a respective geographical area or a trade area or an industrial area. So all these, we believe by the end of the 5 days, we should leave this training well equipped and with assurance that actually if URA has used these approaches in its tax administration, we believe the same approaches can be adopted across the different revenue administrations represented here. Thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you very much, Agnes. You have broken down for us what to expect across the different approaches. Stephen, I am seated here. I'm from somewhere in Africa. Perhaps I came and I'm inquisitive. Perhaps I came saying, well, let me just go and see. I have known to collect revenue from an accounting perspective, from an economics perspective. Why science anyway? Can't I do without it? So please tell us, what changes have you seen in the environment of tax administration that tell us that, you know what, we can't do without science in this century that we're in and going forward? Please tell us.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Agnes, for the broad comments that you just made. I think that question, would better be approached by starting with what is happening in the economic environment, and then we see how it has affected the tax administration. There is the old adage of the tax tail and the economic dog, that the tax cannot influence changes in the economy, but the economy can then influence tax. And the base erosion and profit shifting report is very instructive in this, especially Action 1, that looks at the effect of digitalization on tax administration and indeed the economy. It highlights the fact that now companies are scaling without mass. So you can have a company that is located within your jurisdiction but does not have enough physical presence for you to classify it as a resident. But also, it highlights the reliance on intangible assets as value drivers for a number of companies, and the centrality of data. Now, if you're a tax administration, of course, those things are going to redefine the environment in which you operate. And you have to tool yourself with the technology that really defines that kind of value creation process. And that's why you find that you need to equip yourself with, for example, digital forensics, and I'm very sure John is going to elaborate on this. For example, the way information is kept is different today than it was kept maybe 15 or 10 years ago. Before the dot-com bubble, everyone knew that you would find a ledger, physical ledger, and therefore you would go through it. But that ledger now, on top of being stored on a laptop in soft copy, it could be stored on the cloud, which you cannot readily access. But also from another front, the economic environment in Africa, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, we've seen a renaissance of the manufacturing sector because the traditional manufacturing centers are now financializing their operation or their economies. They are sending what we call light manufacturing into Africa, and that is forming a very significant portion of our economies If you look at the share of manufacturing or industry to GDP, it has risen by over maybe 30, 40% since the late 1990s up to date. Now, tax captures parts of the GDP, and that's why tax to GDP ratio is one of the primary measurements of how well you're doing as an administration. That means that the capacity for you to abstract as much tax from the manufacturing sector is quite important for you as a revenue administration. Therefore, and you see the question then is, what tools do I need for me to get as much from the manufacturing sector? And those tools are going to be scientific. From my experience, like I mentioned, I have 9 years doing this, and I have seen over a period of time that every time we do input-output coefficient analysis, the outturn, and that is the quality of the audit, is maybe threefold better if you use the traditional audit methods. So that is me saying that the environment in which tax administrations operate has shifted. We are undergoing a transition. The challenge we've had as a continent is that we catch on to these things a bit late. There's a lot of literature on the fourth industrial revolution, and to use my experience, in 2015, I think we set up the first working group on the digital economy. And I think the appreciation then, I think, was a bit limited. But now you see, I think about 4 years later, we are grappling to jump onto the wagon. Yet you find countries such as the UK and indeed the European Union were working on things such as the mini one-stop service center, what we call the VATMOS. And those ideas are driven by technology. So the current environment, the economic environment in which the tax administration operates is going to be underwritten by science. What do we define things as? If you say that you're providing some form of incentive for a local manufacturer, who qualifies and who doesn't qualify? If, for example, you're saying that we have a catalog of rules of origin, and I know we're all aware that we are setting up the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, where we are saying that we are opening up our borders, and the products that are coming in from within the continent are not going to be the subject of duties or controls, trade controls. So the question is, what products qualify? If I bring products or component parts from the Middle East and I assemble them in Egypt, do the African countries then allow them without duties? You know, that criteria. So all in all, the language that forms our economies is very fast changing to a scientific nature. So as tax administrations, we need to build frameworks that are in line or that rhyme with the times. And I think that is where, that's how I see tax administrations having to deal with those changes. What we call compliance in this era. Who is non-compliant? You know? How do tax fraud schemes play out in this era where you can operate in an environment digitally but not be physically present? How do we get these huge data sets and make sense out of them? So and that is, I think, my take on that.
Very well put, very well broken down, Stephen. And I don't think we can agree more. Africa, you'll agree with me that the times have changed. The language is actually not changing, it has changed. The issue is, are we aware, are we awake, and are we responding with the times? And you finished with a very important point, Stephen, about building frameworks that rhyme with the times. Closely related to that is the aspect of our domestic revenue mobilization strategies. And I dare say that science has to take its place in these strategies so that right from the level of the ministries of finance in our respective countries, there is deliberate measurement on the impact of science in revenue administration. Which brings me to my third question, which I'll pose to Ian. Ian, my question to you is, picking on from where Stephen stopped, what strength does science have? And consequently, how does it compare with other approaches, such as conventional tax audits? We're talking about digital tracking solutions and things like that. Kindly, if you can break that down for us.
So much. I'll start using, I'll use an example. And these are my own stats. Globally, it's known that, and I won't focus on the construction sector. Transparency International, the people that measure corruption, rate the construction sector and extractives as the most corrupt. They keep interchanging between 1 and 2. And the question is why? Because those two sectors have very lucrative contracts. And because of that, they observe that there are so many kickbacks that move around. That's global, not only Africa, but global. So the question, the fundamental question would be, how do you account for that cost? If it's a very big cost, if you're a business and you have to issue out kickbacks and bribes, how do you account for that cost? In the construction sector, it's very, very easy to know the income of someone earned because this information is public. If a contractor does work and they pay them, it's very easy to identify how much they paid them. What's hard to identify are the costs. And that's where the aggressive tax evasion and planning takes place. And the issue of kickbacks and all that, it's a cost to business. How do you account for it? So what I will do, I'll put it in my costs. I'll have to hide it somewhere in my costs to account for that money. I had a talk with someone from the Netherlands Revenue Authority. He told me something interesting. I haven't verified it yet, but it was quite interesting. He mentioned that in Netherlands, they allow taxpayers to account for bribes. I found that very fascinating. However, if the bribe is to be organized, you have to provide the source where the bribe went to. So if that would be income to them. And that may seem a bit out of scope of what we do, but it's realistic because that's how our world operates. Whether you try to analyze for me, that's how our world operates. So for us, what we try to do is, with science, you look at the costs. The income won't be hidden, but you look at the costs. And the costs, when it comes to these sectors, you have things like materials, things like machinery. That's where I call it the fat or the meat is. So you have to cut into that and try to verify what are these costs. And that's where science comes in. We use a lot of approaches, most importantly, estimation of these costs. We use quantity surveying techniques, or nowadays they call them cost engineers, people that cost infrastructure, and try to understand how much went into these projects. You mentioned conventional approaches. Of course, if I'm doing a traditional audit, I'll use documents provided by the taxpayers. And these documents, remember, they have an input into them. You don't control what they give you. You don't control the documents they give you. Even if it's digital tracking solutions that are helping a lot to improve compliance, those still have a human element. Where the human element and human intervention, relying on people to provide you documents, they can somehow not provide the right information. But if you use scientific approaches, they are based on facts. It's a fact-finding mission. You understand the processes, and you try to understand what has happened based on facts. We don't have that yet here in Uganda, but I hope we shall get there very soon. There's a new technology for other countries where if someone puts up a building, a structure, you can use 3D scanners to scan the whole structure. And that technology can tell you how much materials went into the structure. So if I compare that to your declaration in your, for example, income tax returns, it's just a match of this is what we saw was put in versus what you declared. And you can't dispute it because it's technology. It scans a building and then tells you, use so much steel, use so much cement. And it will be the edge is that these are facts and there's no leeway of arguing the law and all that tax planning. So I implore all of us as Africans to embrace these approaches, because once you do work very well and get the facts, you'll be hard to dispute. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ian. I would like to shift the discussion now to the area of forensics. And John, my question to you is, as we all know here, data is one of the greatest assets for any revenue administration in this current age. Therefore, every form of controlled storage and access will be deployed to preserve and protect data. Now, my question is having digital in such a business environment. In fact, I'll just add, not just digital, but mobile as well. Yeah, thank you. Very briefly, please.
Thank you, Matthew. Before I start my submission, I would like to advise the audience that if you forget anyone, please don't forget the person speaking, because all the answers you want lie with me. Okay? So I'll start by saying that, like Matthew rightly put it, that every form of system that is created today eventually has an output, which is data, okay? And that data is kept in all forms and shapes. Some of it is in databases, others are in Excel sheets, and all the types of forms of data that we have seen. And today, if you go and just search Google, the top 4 or the top 5 largest software companies deal with software that actually create business-related packages, okay? Today we have SAP as one of the biggest software companies that creates finance or accounting-related packages. So this says to us that all businesses are catching on to the trends because the times have changed. No one keeps a black book, or can I say a manual transcript to keep their records, okay? Everyone is now automating. And so if the businesses are using systems and data to, 1, ensure their bottom line, 2, use data for decision support, 3, to support business and to see the growth and the trends of their businesses. So certainly, businesses are going to use this data for their own personal interest and to see that their companies grow from one level to another, okay? Now, as there is the effort to actually move their businesses further, we see that there is usually a natural tendency of getting much of the inclination towards greed or profit maximization. And if a businessman is going to maximize their profits, what are they going to do? They're going to falsify data, they're going to falsify documents, they're going to alter data, and or they're going to misdeclare, okay? So if that is going to be the trend, then you need to use tools that can actually see beyond what the normal eye can actually see. Now, even when data is controlled, it is controlled for the personal interests of the business owners or business entities. And for us as tax administrations, we researched and we realized that the same businesses ensure that data is intact, it is protected, and it is not adulterated in any way. We can use forensic tools to actually look for the original data in case there was intent to actually hide the data, okay? Now, even the scientific interventions that Steve, Ian, and John are going to talk about, at the end of the day, those systems end up with data. Be it input-output coefficients, the analytical sciences, all the data to see the compositions of the different materials. All that is data that can actually be played with or manipulated. And today we are saying that Africa is not going to lie behind, and that is why today we are trying to share what we have found to be very useful to us, because we have tried and tested digital forensics over a various array of industries, okay? I've been in URF for close to 14 years now, and I have not known any time when we went and failed to get the data. That is one, but also it has enhanced the compliance levels, because now the taxpayers know that when you hide data or when you play with information to URA, URA will come with the forensics team, okay? And today we have looked at industries such as wholesale, the supermarkets, we've dealt with the construction industry, we've actually dealt with the manufacturing industry, and we've looked at all the information, but at the end of the day, the taxpayer will want to play with the information for their own interest. But if you have and you deploy digital forensics, you'll be able to actually extract information, transform it, visualize it, or virtualize it in whichever way you want. But at the end of the day, all the efforts for digital forensics, the output is usable information that can actually be translated into revenue-related data that can be used to collect taxes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. My final question is going to another John. And if I'm seated here this morning, John, and I want to know, because this is so much to take in, what are those things in the sessions coming in the week ahead, the key things that I should pay attention to regarding these approaches? And inside there, I'll also ask you, please just touch on the aspects of fairness that science brings to the table when we're talking about the fairness of a tax system, because we are revenue administrators. You will agree with me that the biggest pain taxpayers face is how fair are we being? So how different is science in bridging that gap on fairness, even as you talk about the things that we must focus on? I'll give you strictly 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. I think most of us here as tax collectors, you will relate to the fact that when we look at tax, we always want the most that can be collected to really be collected. And usually this may culminate in a bias, of course, considering the pressure of target sometimes and performance requirements. But now what science is going to do is going to help you overcome that subjectivity where you're applying your emotions and what you want to see vis-a-vis what is the reality. Of course, as mentioned earlier, because of the strength that science is based on objectivity. Take an example of information if it is collected. You cannot tell a person that these are your properties when they are not theirs, because actually, if you use the geographical information systems, those properties will belong to another person. Or if it's at customs, you cannot tell a client that actually this item, say textile, is 100% cotton for you to collect more when actually it is something different. Because when you subject it to testing, it will actually come out what it truly is. And then it will be subject to tax. So what science is going to give you is objectivity. And where you have objectivity, then you will be able to catch on the attribute of fairness which is required in our tax systems. And then just also briefly in the time I've been given, what should we look out for? As you go through these different approaches, they are unique. So consider how each can work independently or how they can work together. Also, I expect that through the discussion, we shall see how what backs up these approaches so that they can work, so that they are not challenged as not founded on anything. So we shall be looking at the legal anchors. And then we are talking science. Science is founded on principles. So think through, as we go through, what is the principle forming the foundation for a given scientific approach. And of course, as we discuss, pay attention to case studies. They may have been anonymized, but some of them are going to be coming out of real life cases. How was it handled and how did it come through? I think I will put it there. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. Why don't we give him a round of applause? John, thank you very much. Delegates, we have just touched the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more ahead, but it's our hope that in these few minutes we have had, it's given you a forecast of what to expect in the coming days. We are now going to break here and have a tea break, but for purposes of housekeeping, this is to inform you that we are going to leave this room permanently, and we shall be moving after the tea break to the Victoria room. You will be directed by the team of tax investigations outside where to go after the tea break. We'd like to thank you for your patience and for your attention. Thank you very much. Once again, let's appreciate these colleagues as they step off the platform. Thank you very much. We shall reconvene in exactly 15 minutes from now at the Victoria room. Thank you. Please carry your property, because this room is going to be used by another function.
Kapo, you seem to be in a hurry. Where are you going to?
I'm gonna pay URA visit.
Why would anyone visit URA? Of all places?
To know more about the Kakasa business solutions, namely digital tracking solution, the voluntary disclosure program and electronic fiscal receipting and invoicing solution, which have turned my business around. You know I need to be on top of my game to protect my empire. If you know, you know.
I too need to know what Kapo knows.
Kakasa, be sure you are in charge of your business. Uganda Revenue Authority, developing Uganda together.
Wait, Abu, tunamaliriza. And what are you doing throwing papers all over the place?
I'm looking for an invoice for a sound system and cables that I received yesterday, but I can't find it.
You know there is a way of keeping all this in one place and available to you as and when you need it.
I really wish there was one, because the way these invoices grow legs and disappear.
I believe this is what you're looking for.
Now how did it get there?
Tabo! Do you know that with EFRIS, you can stay on track of all your business transactions and improve on your record keeping?
How so?
Kati ku computer with EFRIS. I just search using the fiscal document number and I retrieve the records I'm looking for. Bookkeeping becomes simple after that.
Kapo, awesome, yeah.
I began using URS Kakasa Solutions and now I'm in charge of my business. And you can as well.
Kakasa, be sure you are in charge of your business. Uganda